Hey everybody, Joe here with Speedway Motors, and today we're here with Troy Green from Maxima Racing Oils, and we're going to talk oil. And the first question that I want to ask is the difference between conventional versus blend versus full synthetic, and what's going to be right for your engine.
Right.
So to start, just what is the definition? What is conventional, synthetic, and blend?
So if we take a look at the beginning, when oils were made, a long time ago, all we had was a petroleum base, which performs really well, does really good. In that petroleum world, basically what dictates what an oil is, whether it is a petroleum-based or a synthetic, is the base oil. The base oil is what creates that product and drives it into its future. So petroleum-based oils are just that. The base oil is a petroleum-based oil. We have limitations with those base oils of what we can add to them, what they will accept as far as additives, and how complex we can get with that oil. Petroleum-based oils these days are definitely different than what we had, let's say, back in the 70s and 80s, because obviously the refining process is much better than it was back then. So in today's world, petroleum oils are actually very, very good oils. The base oils are very good. All of the Maxima products, all of our petroleum products use what's called a Group 2 Plus base. It is the most highly refined base oil that is available out there. We use that in all of our petroleum-based oils, including our braking oils. So all of our oils we use what we consider to be the best base oil for a petroleum-based oil. Moving on from that into a semi-synthetic, the API doesn't really dictate what a semi-synthetic or a blend has to be to qualify as a semi-synthetic or a blend. It can have 1 or 2% of a full synthetic oil introduced into it, and it qualifies as a semi-synthetic. At Maxima, we don't believe that that's the right thing to do. So our semi-synthetic is an actual true 50-50 blend between our petroleum-based oil and our extremely good RS full synthetic oil. It's a 50-50 blend, and we feel like that's the best way to develop a semi-synthetic oil that performs very well, and price point is always a factor. That puts our price point on a semi-synthetic very reasonable. That makes it very affordable to the racer.
And so then a synthetic, how do you arrive at a synthetic base?
So when we look at a synthetic, now there's a few ways to go about synthetics. We're going to see synthetics on the shelf that are going to range anywhere from $8 a quart up to sometimes over $20 or $25 a quart, and you wonder what that difference is. What that really comes down to is the base oil. Once again, like what we talked about with the petroleum base, in the synthetic world, you have a lot more options of what you can use for a base oil. That really is the determining factor in pricing. Again, for Maxima, we use what's called a Group 5. A Group 5 is really the only base oil out there that you can go in and manipulate and add esters to, which ours is ester fortified. You don't see a lot of ester fortified synthetic oils out there. We don't leave anything on the shelf when it comes to blending an oil and making what we feel like is the best oil on the market. The Group 5 base oils is what dictates this being a full synthetic. You can go all the way back to a Group 3, which is a petroleum-based base oil, but because of some of the refining processes and stuff, we can now classify that as a synthetic oil. Is it as good as a Group 5 ester base? Absolutely not. Does it still perform well? It does, but we will not see the performance advantages, and we won't see the protective characteristics from those lower grade synthetic oils that we do with a Group 5 ester fortified base.
So back to conventional, given everything that's available, given everything you can do with a synthetic, why would you use a conventional this day and age?
Price point is really what drives that a lot, because my background coming from a race engine shop for 25 years, if we're in the racing world, 100%, nothing will make more power than our full synthetic oil will. So if we use a petroleum-based oil, we are going to leave a little bit of power on the table. It won't quite make the power. It does perform very well. It's a very stable oil, and like I said, from the price point, that's what really drives the sales on a petroleum-based oil.
And another thing that you hear when you're comparing a synthetic versus a conventional is like the molecule size, and that one is like thicker than the other. What is that all about?
Exactly. So the base oil is a lot more unstable in a petroleum-based oil because it doesn't allow us to introduce some of those items into the base oil that will bolster that base oil and make it more stable at higher temperatures. So one of the things that we have to do is a petroleum oil in the same viscosity as a synthetic will look a little thicker, and it will be because we have a scale that falls, that oil can fall in. A 2050 has a scale that it can fall in and still be a 2050. Well, a petroleum-based oil, because it will break down a little sooner than a synthetic, we try to make that oil a little higher on the scale, a little thicker to start with, so that when it does start to lose its viscosity, we don't see that pressure loss like we do in a world where the petroleum-based oil is going to break down and we're going to see that loss. One of the things that we're able to do with a synthetic is what's called viscosity modifiers, that actually, as the oil heats up, those actually expand, grow, so that we maintain that viscosity throughout a wide range of oil temperatures.
So then let's talk about a blend. What are your use cases for a blend versus a conventional and versus a full synthetic?
Again, one of the things that's going to drive those sales to the semi-synthetics or the blends is going to be price point. It again is substantially cheaper, and if you look at our semi versus lots of the others, you get a lot better value because we're basically the same price as all of the other semi brands that are on the market these days, but they are not using a 50-50 blend, and the synthetic side of their blend is not a Group 5 ester base. So you get a lot of value in this bottle for the money. It's a very stable oil. All of these work great with methanol. So if we're talking about a sprint car or any circle track racing, even some of the drag race world where we're running methanol, all of these oils do blend very well with methanol. Probably not an ounce of difference in any of them as far as how they perform with methanol or ethanol-based fuels. A price point really drives the semi, and it's a very good performing oil. It's going to make really good power, and it's going to protect very well. It's going to give you a longer life than the petroleum oil, so we can go a little bit longer between oil changes. So not only are you going to save a little money over the synthetic when you're initially buying, but in that long run where you're going to get more runtime out of that oil change, it's also a little bit of a money-saving thing too.
So then let's move on to a full synthetic. We've kind of talked about some of the benefits. One, just looking at oil change intervals, right? What is it about a synthetic that makes it last longer? Again,
that base oil is what we really come back to there. We look at the stability of that base oil and how it's going to break down over normal use, and sometimes abnormal use when maybe we've got a fuel system that's a little bit over-rich and we're going to dilute that oil just a little more than we normally would. That synthetic oil is going to capture that extra fuel and still continue to lubricate and perform very well, where a petroleum-based oil or a blend is going to struggle a little bit with an overfueled situation. The synthetic will still perform very well once it's been abused. It's just going to recover better and maintain its lubricity and all of its performance characteristics even after it's been abused quite a bit.
You're talking about, with the full synthetic, you're talking about the esters. What does that mean?
So what we do, we fortify the base oil with esters, and these esters are in there to perform very specific functions. One of them is going to be to work with DLC coated parts. We're always concerned about shedding oil off a DLC so that we lose that weight and we lose all of that. Well, we still have to have some lubrication on DLC parts, even when they're, let's just say you got a DLC pin running on a bronze bushing in a wrist pin, something like that. Well, we still need some oil in there. So what we do, we have an ester that is in there just to specifically attach oil to those DLC coated parts so that we do still have some lubrication. Because like I said, those parts do need to be lubricated. Ring seal is one of the things that we also promote with esters in the full synthetic and the semi, because it does have 50% of that oil in it. You'll see much better ring seal. So in any closed crankcase system where we have a vacuum pump and we're drawing a vacuum in the crankcase, more vacuum is always more power. The better the ring seal is, the more vacuum we will make. So in turn, one of the things we'll see with a full synthetic is a better ring seal, in turn more power. A lot of people will think that the power increase comes from the oil being slicker, losing that friction. That's not necessarily where the power comes from when we switch to a synthetic oil. Ring seal plays a huge role in that power increase, and that's one of the things that we're able to do with the esters in the RS oils. So that is a very complex oil. I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about true race oils is all of the functions that they have to perform and all of the small pieces that go into making up that oil and the effort that's put into that oil to perform all of these very specific functions. You know, it's not just a handful of things thrown into a vat. It's a very, very complex process to blend these oils.
And you know, there are myths surrounding oil. You know, lots of myths. And one with synthetic is that it burns, like it wants to get into the chamber, and it's more likely if your engine is burning oil, synthetic oil is going to make it worse. Is that a myth, or is
so no? There is some truth to that, because, like I said, ring seal is always going to be an issue with a synthetic oil. That's one of the reasons that we use a ring seal property in that oil to help seal that ring, because anybody that doesn't use it, yes, synthetic oil wants to climb past those rings, and it wants to introduce itself into the combustion chamber and on top of the piston, which we all know is an absolute no-no. We do not want oil in a combustion chamber at all. We want that to be as dry as it possibly can be. So I would say be careful with some of the synthetic oils out there that are not going to produce as good of a ring seal as Maxima products will, and you will see the potential for some damage. Especially if that engine has run the majority of its life on a petroleum-based oil. Now we've got these certain wear patterns that the engine is used to seeing, and now we've introduced something new that, like I said, a lot of the synthetics are not made for proper or good ring seal. So sometimes that's where we're going to see some of that those detrimental things happen when we introduce a synthetic oil into an engine like that.
So what about older engines? You know, like a small block Chevy is almost 70 years old at this point.
Right.
So, you know, you would think that you would want to use a conventional oil in an older engine or in an older car. Right. Is it okay to use a synthetic?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's always okay, especially if you're looking at a full synthetic like ours that's very robust and very advanced. Absolutely a great place to run a full synthetic oil would be in a older conventional small block Chevrolet.
And what about a flat tappet cam that's already been broken in? You know, your old engine, is that synthetic still okay?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I will tell you, one of the things that we really push on our flat tappet stuff. Now, I do have a lot of flat tappet customers run our full synthetic, especially in the 305 of the Race Saver world, and have excellent luck with it. But a lot of my guys will run semi-synthetic. One of the reasons for that is we feel like we get just a little bit better lifter turn with a semi-synthetic versus a full synthetic. We all know that that's what we really need with a flat tappet camshaft, is we need that lifter to be spinning to keep it alive. And I can't say conclusively that we've ever seen an issue to where full synthetic slowed the lifter down from turning, but there's been some evidence showing that it may slow the lifter down just a touch. So a lot of flat tappet situations and applications, then I will usually recommend our semi-synthetic for those applications, and it works very well. Now, the full synthetic does work very well there also. Like I said, the only thing we have seen in the past is possibly some evidence of a lifter not spinning quite as well as it should. Yeah.
So what about, you know, LS swaps are all the rage. You know, take kind of a modern engine, put it in an old car. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of that around here. What would be your recommendation for let's say it's a mild LS. Let's say that it's basically a stock LS that you put a cam in.
Yep.
What do you want to look for there?
So first of all, what we're going to look for is bearing clearances. That's going to dictate what weight oil we're going to use. And let's just say we end up back with somewhere around the factory bearing clearances in the low 2000s range on rod and mains. Then I would like to see something like a 530 full synthetic in that engine. One of the reasons we want to see that is because most of the LS engines have a very light tension oil ring. They have a very small top and second ring. So ring seal is a little difficult in those engines. It's a little bit difficult. It's one of the things that we do very well with our full synthetic is seal the ring, just like we talked about a few minutes ago. So that's a place that our full synthetics work very well, is in late model LS, Ford, the Hemi engines. It works very well in those engines that have real light tension ring packages.
What about a turbo? Not only do you have forced induction dealing fits with your rings, but you also have oil feeding the turbo.
Right, exactly. A lot of times in those turbo applications, we're going to look at whether that is a street car application or a race car application. So I'll say most of our drag race customers that are our twin turbo guys are using our straight weights, so a 50, 60, or 70 weight in those applications. Our street car guys are still going to be using most likely like our RS15W50, and that's going to be a fantastic oil to keep those turbo bearings alive, and it works very well in the engine.
So let's talk about interchange. Like, let's say I've been running a conventional and I want to switch to synthetic or vice versa. How does that work?
So it does work. It's not an issue with any of the Maxima products. If you've been on our petroleum or our synthetic for, hypothetically, let's just say the last year or whatever, all of a sudden you decide you want to switch over to our full synthetic, no problem. Now I won't say that is going to be the case for every brand of oil out there, because like we talked earlier, ring seal plays a big role in this, and synthetics do struggle sometimes with ring seal. You're not going to have that problem with Maxima products, but some of the other products that are out there may not have the same chemistry that we have. So you may go from a conventional oil to a synthetic and start to see some oil usage. You may see some oil burn. But I can tell you with Maxima products, you won't have that problem. You're good to switch from a petroleum, a semi-synthetic, and go to the full synthetic at any time with no problem at all.
All right, well, thank you, Troy. Thanks to everybody for watching.